My name's Jessica Sublett. I'm the president and CEO of Bounce Innovation Hub, which is a nonprofit entrepreneurial support organization in downtown Akron. And we focus on companies that are a bit earlier than the stage that you're all at. So this is really awesome to see, what they're all aspiring to be. So I'm really excited to bring this group of folks to you today. So we're going to talk about growth. Obviously, this whole session is about growth. The whole day is about growth, but this is where your next million might come from. So, we think about what might be the next big thing, what might be the next market, product, or expansion. But that doesn't always come from reinventing who you are. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, it comes from adjacencies or opportunities that, might be right in front of you. So we're going to talk about how these leaders think through those decisions, what opportunities are worth pursuing, how do you grow without losing focus? And there's this famous saying, I think I've even heard it twice today, what got you here won't get you to there. So how do we build the people, the processes, and the infrastructure necessary to support that growth? So to get us started, I would love to have you each introduce yourselves and then, talk a little bit about some of the growth you've experienced.
Jason Therrien, founder and CEO at a marketing agency called ThunderTech. We're a full-service integrated firm from brand to web and everything in between. We work a lot with this type of company, this second stage. I love that term, and especially in the middle market. So I not only have dealt with these questions personally as the owner, but also we work with clients on it. So the guilty rule will remain nameless today, though.
Hi, everybody. I'm Laurie Colagiovanni. I am the founder and president of Disinfection Management Technology. I'm not sure why we gave it such a long name, but I started out working for a medical parts company 15 years ago and had the opportunity to develop this idea that hospitals needed companies to come in and clean their medical equipment. So bid on a job with a local hospital here and won the bid. And so started down this path with this larger company. And then in 2019, that company was being sold and the buyer didn't want the division we had created. So I put my hand up and said, I want it. So I bought the company in 2019 and made it mine, and had 6 employees, 1 hospital that we were working with. And today I have 100 employees and 22 hospitals that we work with to disinfect their medical equipment. But we've created more divisions, and I'm excited to, talk about some of how we've found some growth in a lot of different ways.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Vince Venditti. I'm the president and co-owner of Premier Home Pros. I've really spent my entire career in marketing and technology. I've worked for startups as well as companies as large as $2 to $2.5 billion a year. I was at one of those companies when I received a phone call from the 2 founders of Premier Home Pros asking if I would consider joining their 6-month-old company. They were on track to do $15 million in sales that year. I thought that was super impressive, so I took the meeting. That was 2023. 2024, I joined. We did $86 million in sales. Mm-hmm. In 2025, we did 151. And so far this year, we're on track to do about $250 million. We are fully private. We do not have any venture capital or private equity investment. Something we're super proud of, and we're local here to the Akron area. We have 17 offices across the country, and we are a bathroom remodeling and flooring company. So that's me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. And that's super impressive from all of you. So one little terminology thing I do just want to talk about when we say second stage, we're using a framework from the Edward Lowe Foundation where stage 1 is up to $1 million and then stage 2. So second stage would be $1 million and up. So this is a perfect panel to talk about, okay, we've made our first $1 million. So what's next? So growth sounds exciting, but for many companies, it becomes more difficult as they get larger. So what's different about earning your first $1 million versus your next $1 million?
The first $1 million, I think, is sometimes very chaotic, depending on the organization. And that next proverbial second $1 million, right, can be even more chaotic if you allow it, but you have a base. So I think that's the option, right, is that how intentional are you about whatever that next stage of growth is? And that's what I'm looking forward to talking about today.
I would say very similar. That first million, you're hands on everything. You're in there, and for me, we work in hospitals. We staff these departments, so a lot of times I'm in scrubs. I'm doing the work. I'm there. I'm making it happen. I'm making sure we have the necessary coverage. But now, I've built that team that's kind of boots on the ground handling that stuff. And now I can step back and say, okay, now what are our, strategic goals and where do we want to go next? And how are we going to do that? But very, like you said, very chaotic in that first, time frame.
It is chaotic. I would say that it really comes down to the horizon, like the time frame that you're working on. So your first million, you're thinking about the day. Like, what do I need to do today in order to make money today? Then you might maybe think about tomorrow, but you're in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to 10 or 20 million, or at the company I was at, 2,000 million, right? The billions of dollars. At that point, you're thinking about next quarter, next month, next year. So, you change your horizon of, are you trying to make an impact on something that you're doing today? Or are you planning for the moves that you're going to be making in 6 months, kind of laying the tracks for where that train's headed? That, and I think the chaotic thing is exactly right. You're scrappy in the very beginning. You're so scrappy. You're quite literally in survival mode. Whereas you can become more corporatized and more planned out as you scale into a larger company.
Mm-hmm.
So as you look back, what are some of, where did some of your most successful initiatives come from? Was it new customer, market, product, maybe deepening a relationship with an existing customer? And I think, Laurie, if you want to kick us off, I think you've got a good story for that.
For us, and we're a completely labor-based organization. So when we would get a new customer, I always looked at it as, put your roots in the ground, find new opportunities within that framework. So, anytime anybody would say, oh, Laurie, can you guys do this? Can you, pick up this piece of equipment? Can you clean this? Yes. Always yes. One thing I will say that I've learned along the way is always add that to the contract so that the next time, you go to renew and you have it in there. But just that willingness to always kind of be a partner with a customer and do more than they expect. And that's what I tell my people, always go above and beyond.
Ours has come from hiring the right people. It's really difficult to, you need money to hire the right people, but then you need the right people to make you money. So it's kind of that catch-22. Like you need experience to get a job. You need a job to get experience. So it comes down to sacrificing maybe your own pockets while you're building that team. It's difficult to be super profitable in the beginning. If, what are you optimizing for? You're optimizing for growth. You're optimizing for profitability. And if you try to do both, it's going to be very difficult. So I would say one of the things that we did is realize that as the owners of the company, it's not necessarily our time to become rich. That will come in time as you build the company. So as long as you have that mentality as an owner, that is your number one way to grow, is to constantly reinvest all the money back into the company versus bleeding it dry and then wondering why you can't grow.
I think there were two things I'd answer that question with. First, it was having we call it courageous curiosity, but it's just the ability to ask more questions of a client to understand, right? It's their pocketbook that we're getting paid from. What are their issues? And not just what are the needs to solve the issue, but like, what's the real core issue? That allowed, which I'm sure we'll get into, a lot of expansion of services and solutions over the years. The other was a philosophy that I was very fortunate, I think, to grapple or to grab onto early on, was that so much of our world is commoditizing at a faster rate, right? And AI and other things are just causing that to go faster. So what do I have today that might be in the target of that commoditization trap if we don't evolve? And for some of our services, that meant to move upstream faster then the commoditization forces, were taking it down.
That's great. So, a lot of folks assume that growth means doing something entirely new. Have you found that to be true? Is it the opposite? Is it building from existing strengths? What's your perspectives on that?
Yeah, I think I've said this for a long time, long before I was an entrepreneur, but I was always fascinated by the boring companies. I think so many people think that you have to invent a new app or a new social media platform or some new fancy AI tool. And it's probably because those are the chic industries that you see on X and you see online and they're exciting. But we're a bathroom remodeling company. There's nothing innovative about that. It's just, how do you take a product or an industry that's maybe been a bit of a laggard when it comes to innovation? And how do you take some of the findings from the Amazons, from these, Ubers, these companies? What are they doing? Because every chic industry has been institutionalized or Ivy Leagued in a way, right? Like what happened to the taxi industry when Uber came around was quite disruptive. Well, that hasn't really happened there's plenty of boring industries out there that hasn't happened to, bathroom remodeling being one of them. So did I dream of growing up and becoming the owner of a bathroom remodeling company or flooring company? No, I wanted to run an agency. But here we are, right? So I think that would be it.
Switch?
Yeah, not anymore. Maybe a few years ago. But yeah, I think that's the big thing is you don't have to dream big and come up with a brand new idea. You can revolutionize an idea that's been around for a long time. And a lot of the people that you meet who are doing incredibly well have done just that.
We tried to do well at what we were doing, which was hospital equipment disinfection. And so we had been doing that for a number of years. And my thinking was, well, we're really good at, disinfecting in the hospital. Maybe we should think about taking it outside of the hospital, opening up to other markets. So we started kind of kicking around this idea and putting together the plan for a mobile disinfection company that could go out and could help medical offices or schools that had the flu, or, we just kind of thought this is a good idea. Well, it was the month before the pandemic, and we had amassed all of this equipment, and we had bought a van, and a month later, it was like, oh, there's a pandemic. We were in the right place at the right time. So for us, we did really well. We wound up contracting with Akron Public Schools for 3 years. We were the company that went in. I don't know if anybody had kids there, but we went in and treated those school buildings once a month. There was no kids in them for the most part because they had shut down. But we knew our skill set. We knew disinfection, and we took that outside of the hospital and found a new way to do things. So, and again, like, you were saying, there's nothing exciting about cleaning medical equipment and all of that, but, we found that, it was exciting to, be able to expand outside of that and grow.
I'll keep it simple. I think connecting the dots, right? That if you're listening to the customer and you're looking for opportunities and you're curious, you can find, and it doesn't have to be outside the arena, right? It can be right next door that you can be of value to.
So as you're growing, it's great. It's super exciting. But without preparation and process and infrastructure, it can also be detrimental. And we've heard a lot about EOS today and how that process can play a role. But, for all of you, as you've grown your companies, what role did that play in getting to where you are? $250 million a year. You can't possibly function without processes in place now. But how did that do? Was it processes first? Was it processes had to come in? I'd just love for you all to give an example of what it was like to implement that structure as you launch and as you grow.
So process can be the best and worst thing that can ever be introduced to an organization. Lack of process is chaos. Too much process is bureaucracy. We've all worked for those companies where it's, you need approval at 17 layers to get anything done. And it's so processed that it comes down to a risk tolerance, right? It's like you'll never make a bad you'll never make a bad decision. You just won't make any decisions. So how could you make a bad one?
Yeah.
And I felt that when I was at a $2.5 billion a year organization that had 2 private equity companies behind it. And that's ultimately what led me to join where I'm at. So it is kind of finding that very sliver, that very little tiny piece of in between chaos and structured chaos. And I think that's where the magic happens. But it comes down to like you as the owner, you as the leader of the organization, how much risk do you want to take on? Do you want to, I've always said, I'd rather you make 10 decisions today and get 8 of them right and we'll live with the 2 bad ones than you make 2 decisions today and get them both right. Because that's my risk tolerance. Now, if that's not your risk tolerance, you need to go with a different strategy. But that's personally where I live is let's be a bit more aggressive. But if you set that tone right from the top, you can lead the organization that way.
For us, process is kind of everything. When I go and visit some of my customers, which are hospitals in this case, I want to see my staff doing the same process in Toledo as I will see if I go to Youngstown into a different hospital. Everybody has to do everything the same and follow the process. It's so important in healthcare, especially, within these institutions that have to have inspections, and there's, Department of Health and different organizations that will be coming in. And then within that, I have a really good management team. I have managers in each of these hospitals, and they have to follow a process as well. So, you said, process can be, your best friend and sometimes not, but, it's easy to see when somebody's not following the process because things are going wrong or, you're having problems with something. So, we try really hard to stick, we put it on every bulletin board in every one of our hospitals, process, team, and that's what we follow.
I think to Vince's point, too much process can be bureaucratic, but it can paralyze growth. And yes, to your risk tolerance point, I agree, but I also think like you're in this room for a reason. There is assumed risk leading or owning any business.
Mm-hmm.
It may be small, but it has to be present, right, to grow. We have a new service that we've been rolling out, and we have enough pilots that I feel comfortable with it right now. There are certain members of my leadership team that want more time. I said, no, the release, the news announcement's going out on X date. And it gave them a deadline, right? And it gave them some accountability to it. I think that's a big piece with it is that there's still all these moving parts. It's if you can go 80%, I think that's a great rule of thumb. But there has to be an acceptance that with risk comes some danger too.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So shifting gears a little bit to this maybe hidden growth opportunity within existing customers. So, you spend a lot of time chasing new customers, and obviously that's a big part of Vince's business, but, where might there be untapped growth opportunities with existing customer relationships?
I kind of said that, earlier that, when we, find a customer, we, put down roots, try to grow as much as we can from within, and then, try to duplicate that in other facilities that we can partner with. We've taken, what might start out as a very modest, small contract, and we've grown it, really large, because we took our time, we customized, and we always say, it can be as much or as little as you want it to be. We have the ability to customize our contracts and then kind of grow into them. And for us, it's been really beneficial to be able to work that way.
We've seen it when we have corporate clients looking at adjacent budget areas, right? So as a marketing agency, right, most of my peers worry about the marketing department, and this makes sense, right? But we said, well, I also want to meet sales, and while we're at it, let's talk to IT. And what does HR do in terms of your communications, internal communications, or maybe your recruitment budget? And it really expands us out by considering different budget line items.
Mhm.
I think my line of business is a bit different in that, we have 10,000 customers versus a smaller pool of recurring customers. One kind of story I could tell is we were bathroom remodeling only. And in a bathroom remodel, you do the flooring, the cabinet, and the wet space, we call it. I can't tell you how many customers we were hearing from that were saying, well, can you also run the flooring into my master bedroom? Well, no, we can't. We're not a flooring company. And we kind of looked at each other and went, well, how are we not a flooring company if we're already doing flooring? Isn't it just more of that? So we realized very quickly that the consumers were telling us something. There's a growth opportunity here. And we're like, we'll just order more flooring. How hard can it be? We have the installer that can do it. We have the demand. Like, this is clearly a gap in the market. So before you know it, then it's, well, can you do the living room? Can you do the dining room? Can you do the kitchen? And I think the natural next step would be, well, we're doing wet water, cabinets, and flooring. What does that sound like? It sounds like a kitchen. So there's parallels here that you can kind of spin into. And when you build your business around a process, not a product, that's really what we've done. We've built it around the process of generating a lead, selling a lead, and installing a lead. Whether that is a floor, a bathroom, a roof, whatever it may be, you can plug that product in and it kind of fits seamlessly in that process.
Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
So you've all talked about risk. Growth does take risk. I'd love to hear about a risk that you've taken recently, and whether we're still vetting that that's going to work, or a growth initiative that looked promising that didn't work out. We're all in a room of leaders and want to be candid of failure happens. So what did that look like? If we can share some of that.
All right, I'll take the first arrow. So it's funny, I'm not sure the tenure of your businesses, but we've been around a couple decades now, and the tool sets that weren't frankly available in the early 2000s, I had engineers on staff, so we built a lot of things. Well, we also thought, well, if we could build them for us, should we build them for others? Should we become essentially a product company? And a product and a service company are very difficult to scale at the same time, especially when you're small. We chose the less lucrative path of going down the service business. But today, now with AI, we're confronting this again. And we know enough now to say, well, can we have our cake and eat it too in some way? So we have some tools, but they're not maybe for the mass. They're for particular client needs, and it's kind of right sizing some of those decisions based on old wounds that we've inflicted.
We just launched a new division. Like I said, sometimes you just don't know where the next thing is going to come from. But we were approached to become a distributor for a floor cleaning robotics company. And I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, well, we do disinfection. Disinfection is what we know. Floors are dirty too. And this is something that can help a hospital, but it can help anywhere. It can, do carpet. It can do hardwood, hard floor, whatever. So we did decide to take that risk. We purchased 2 of the robots. We bought a scrubber and a sweeper, and I hired a salesperson to take the 2 robots and take them on the road, set up some demonstrations, learn everything you can learn. And fortunately, he's a young person who understands robots and computers and really is so well suited to this new technology. So he's presented them at the Browns Stadium, and next week he's going to the Bengals Stadium, and he's already sold a whole batch of them to the VA hospitals. And so it's doing really well. And for me, I wasn't sure. We're not in that particular market. We're not a janitorial company, but this is something that still kind of aligns with our core values, our mission statement. We're disinfecting. So we're going in that direction because frankly, I see that as the future. And I think that that's what's, coming, and it's not to replace people. It's really to assist, other people's teams in what they do. So that's been really good for us.
On my side, we just took an enormous risk, and it was moving into a former IKEA facility and creating our own warehouse and logistics portion of the company. So prior to this, we were drop shipping everything from a local supply house to one of our locations, and then from there, packaging it up and shipping it to the consumer's home and installing it. What we realized is the margins on that are nowhere as good as if you're able to kind of jump all the way to the manufacturer themselves. So put 2 people on a plane over to China, had them go through the warehouses or the manufacturing plants, as well as some of the stateside items that we purchase. And now we have a building that I never would have imagined we'd have. It's like it takes you 2 hours to walk around the whole thing. And as big of a risk as it was, it fit our risk appetite. What did I learn? It is a lot harder than I ever would have thought. I think that's one thing I learned in general at this company, growing up in really the marketing and technology side of the house. I thought like HR, finance, like how hard can they be? Like just counting money. And now that I'm in charge of that, it is like, I hate it. It is so hard. Yeah, I would say just the starting a business that grows at this rate, it's really nothing but risk. And those are a couple of things that I learned very recently.
Yeah, I think that this next question, I'll start with you to follow up on that. So what role did data play in making that decision? If you're going after new opportunities and they're risky, what role is data playing in that?
Yeah, so we are, I'm a geek. I'll be the first one to admit that. That's what my background was analytics. So when we look at opening a new office or new location, we're looking at what the industry calls SFDUs, which are single family dwelling units that are owner occupied. So just homes, right? But not renters, not apartment buildings, homes. So what we're able to do is pull the data within a 2-hour radius of, well, how many homes are within that drive time? And then what's the poverty rate? What's the homeownership rate? What's the average income? And you kind of score and model those out, and you say it looks a lot like this existing office we have open. So you can start to model that. So if we model an office and we want to go to Topeka, Kansas, we will know if that office is going to be successful or not simply based on these few parameters. And if it comes back that there's only 200,000 homes in that area, we know that that's not an office that we can withstand profitably. So that's why you go to the A tier, B tier markets first. So it all starts with data. In the absence of data, you use a little bit of intuition, and you good is better than nothing. But yeah, it's absolutely all data driven.
Same here. I mean, we in identifying new markets and new hospitals for us, the data that we're looking at is public information. Medicare publishes a lot of stuff about how they rate hospitals. What are their infection rates? What's the size? How many locations do they have? I'm a small business, and, we do much better with independent hospital systems, small, 2 or 3 or 4 maybe locations, not these, huge conglomerates that Cleveland Clinic, being one of them. They don't like to outsource this type of work. So there's really not an opportunity there for me. I'm not going to, spend a lot of time pursuing that. But in terms of the other things, like when we started our mobile disinfection or even this with the robots, sometimes you just, you have to go with a little bit of instinct. I think that, this is what's coming. Like I said, we're not investing a lot of money, but we're investing some money in that. And, we're trying to, again, follow our process, identify, who are our markets, who are our customers, and then hopefully generate sales from that.
Maybe instead of like just the pure definition of data, I'd say, and this is through a lot of the lens of ThunderTech's clients. It's, the known knowns and the known unknowns. And it's interesting because I think we don't talk about it enough in the business world. Like there's offensive and defensive reasons to grow. And as much as you want to play offense, you can only control your brand, your team, and you can't control your competition. So We see that a lot of things happen when they're playing defense, and it's not always bad. It can be good, but it's understanding why and what you know about that and what you don't know to make those decisions then.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when you're thinking about that, are there questions, you're all engaged with lots of other business leaders. Are there questions that you see that leaders should be asking that you think they frequently are not?
I think I think you have two customers, and I think most people don't realize you have two customers. The cliche thing to say is, it's your consumers and your employees. Yes, right, they're of course, but you also have your suppliers, and I think that a lot of businesses think, well, our take care of the customer, but I don't. I bet you, if you asked most businesses who's your secondary customer, if they can't say employee, they probably can't answer the question, because without your strategic partnerships, you don't have a business, right? Because it could come down to something as simple as the resin that we purchase to make the wall panels that go in the shower. It's like, well, without that, we don't have a business. So that's our second customer. Even though we on paper are their customer, I think it's different too.
Yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, we have a limited number of customers where you have a lot of customers. We also try to focus on the employees, and I try to teach, and these are a lot of times young people. Maybe this is their first job. They might be 18 or 19 years old, just coming out of high school, in Akron, and this is their first job. And we want to teach them as they, grow with us. So, a lot of times I'll tell them, listen, when you're in front of the customer, when you're working in the hospital, you're my representative, you're me. So you better behave and act as you think I would, because, this is the reflection of the whole company. So, our people are really important to our business. So taking care of them aligns with taking care of the customer.
So I think the question around growth that I don't hear get discussed enough is back to the customer, but it's the jobs to be done mantra, right? Because you might be selling a 1/4-inch drill bit, but that customer is really buying a 1/4-inch hole. They don't care how the heck it gets there. They have a need for that, not the drill bit, right? So when you boil that back for a lot of brands, that's when the growth opportunities open up, because it's not about what you have to sell. It's about what the customer needs you to provide.
I love that as a startup support organization where you have to be solving a problem or filling an unmet need, and nobody cares how the heck you do it as long as you do it. So we're going to move on to Q&A.
Record for this, our business, then the AEF building, so we're your neighbors, and I've gotten to know in a year or two, we've been in there, a couple of your employees in the call center.
Yeah.
And so I admire that it seems to be from the outside, just in hallway conversations, that you've had success in setting appointments over the phone and old school dialing for dollars. And if you had any secrets you wanted to share as to maybe why you chose that method, I'm assuming those are your employees.
Yeah.
And you run it in-house.
Yeah.
And it just on the outside, it seems to be very well run, because I see the same faces. For people to stay in telemarketing and dial for dollars for more than 3 weeks is amazing, I think.
Yeah.
So any insight you have on how to make that work and why you chose that method? I don't think it'd be expensive, and how'd you make it work?
So I think the first thing is incredible training. Obviously, you need to make sure that you are setting people up to succeed by giving them the playbook. Somebody said, I think in an earlier session, if you just train them, tell somebody to do something twice, throw them out there, sink or swim, they're probably going to sink. So the most important thing would be have a process. I know we kind of hit on process before, but have a process to make sure that they are trained and set up to win. And then when they win, compensation structure is really important. It has to be a structure to where the upside is phenomenal and the downside is not, right? Because the people who are going to be ultimately building your business with you, they want to be part of something, and they need to feel like when you're winning, it's very hard to put out a video to say, hey, we did $1 million in sales yesterday. If they're not feeling any different about that because they didn't participate in, the outcome of that, I think that's when people leave. So one, culture and buy-in, but two, make sure your compensation structure and your training are aligned with what you ultimately want, which is retention.
Hi, Austin Manna. I own a company called Identiphoto. We provide ID and badging solutions to large scale organizations. Been running into this a little bit. I guess my question is, how do you know when you feel like you're running up against the limits of organic growth, and maybe it's time to move into inorganic growth? Both from a capacity standpoint and from just trying to survive and not die.
I would say, look around you. There's, we started out and still do focused on hospitals, but now we're looking around the outside. One thing I learned in sales too was, start in one place and hit everything around, go a 2-mile radius around that first place, and seek more opportunity. For us, I mean, it's again, you know what you do, badges are really important. And there's lots of industries that I'm sure, use a product like that. Don't be afraid to try a new one. Learn what you can about it. And then, kind of, you got nothing to lose. This has kind of always been my philosophy, to try something new.
I think our clientele at ThunderTech, has a whole mix of what you're talking about. And the inorganic side, going back to my earlier point about defensive, some have jumped into it to not get swallowed up because of the state of their industry, right? They think they've gone as far as it can, but they also think that if they don't, there are forces at play outside of, themselves that will come in and eat their lunch eventually. So they go the inorganic route to start bolting on either additional services or more territory or whatever the situation might be for you. Mm-hmm. So I think that, yes, you got to keep looking, because I think there's always opportunity sitting all around. But at the same time, you might want to be thinking, is it an offensive or defensive play?
Anything to add, Vince?
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. I worked at a pizza place, and organic growth is when the phone just rings, you answer the phone, you cook the pizza, you deliver it, you collect the cash. That is just capturing demand that is already out there. Absence of that, you have to go out and spin the sign, right? And you're spinning the sign, and that's advertising. You're trying to make the phone ring. My point is, if when the phone rings, your funnel isn't near perfect, meaning when the phone rings, what's your conversion rate to make an appointment, your appointment rate to your price or your demo rate to your close. Mm-hmm. If that isn't perfect, you have no business going out and trying to advertise. So perfect your funnel. Once your funnel's perfect, then you think, okay, we've got a system that works. Let's pour some more gas on top of it. But gas on a broken funnel, it's not worth it.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, panel. Tyler with Ratcliffe. This is really for anyone, because I appreciate the line of questioning around analyzing data, making decisions that are risky for growth. But can you give the room advice on how you're involving your team or leadership team on some of those decisions that need to be made? And more importantly, how are you making them feel like they've been a part of those decisions? So when success does happen, it's a whole team effort.
I make them make the decisions. Yeah, if I'm the smartest person in the company and it's top down, we're not going to be very good. So I think the concept is, I expect you to bring disruptive ideas. I expect, that's part of the job. I always say it's the 3 I's. Can you come up with an idea? Can you influence the idea? And can you implement the idea? A lot of people can come up with ideas. They can't influence it. If they can influence it, they can't actually implement it. But if you find an employee that can do all 3 of those, give them the keys. Let them do what they got to do.
I like to involve, with our foray now into robotics, I had all of our managers do the robot training, because, you never know when you're going to be able to spot a new opportunity, or, or with our mobile disinfection, maybe, somebody who, has a business, and, or your kid goes to a school and they've had to shut down because there's so much flu going around. So I try to make sure everybody knows all the aspects of our business so that they can talk about it, no matter what. Even if you're a manager in a small community hospital, and that's, been where you've, been the whole time, it's still good to be able to know what else we do and look for other opportunities.
I saw that Ratliff is a sponsor, so thank you guys. The way I would answer that, I think, is twofold. I agree with Vince. How do you have folks that are making their own decisions, right? And that's dependent on the organization and the role and the level of decision. But also, how do you pressure test decisions in front of folks or with a group, right? To say, well, even if you think you know, or you're pretty darn sure, I want emerging leaders to have those reps, right? Because maybe they bring something to me that we haven't thought of yet, and it wasn't as much of a slam dunk as I thought. Or maybe they just feel a little more, they have a little more skin in the game because they're part of that conversation versus having it just thrown down at them.
Other questions? Well, I have one. So if you could give everyone in this room one test that they could apply next week to evaluate whether a growth opportunity is worth pursuing, what would it be?
I can think of one thing here. It would be, what is best case scenario and what is the dollar impact of that? And then do that for every idea that's thrown out. So if you have an idea session, say, hey, throw out an idea. There are no bad ideas. Some are just better than others. So let's stack rank these ideas. We'll eventually get to all of them, but it comes down to prioritization. I think the number one thing when it comes to growing a company isn't necessarily coming up with great ideas. It's deciding which one to attack first, second, and third. So I would say, okay, good. What does good look like if we do this? What does perfect look like if we do this? If we do this perfect, it's a $10 million idea. If we do this perfect, it's a $200,000 idea. Of course, we want to do the $200,000 idea. Do we want to do it in place of the 10 million, 20? No, we don't, right? So it comes down to putting some math behind it and then stack ranking and attacking them in the right order.
All right, the marketer will give the less analytical side of this. One thing I really enjoy and has worked well for myself and my team is a reminder that risk is actually opportunities where risk occurs, right? And you know thyself, you know your organization, hopefully well. And I still push especially my tenured team members, say, did that give you the butterflies, right? Did you get a little nervous at least? Because if you're not a little anxious, you're probably, you stall your growth.
Mhm.
And I don't want that for myself. I certainly don't want that for my team members. So it doesn't have to be wild, but we go out far enough that's like, oh, this is a little different, a little new. Are the butterflies back?
I like that.
We're kind of similar to that. We have a Friday management meeting, and so at least twice a month, I task somebody with, bring us a new product or innovation that you've found out about. What's something that we could use to make it better for us, that we could grow with? And that can be, as simple as new cleaning products that we're going to introduce to the hospital. There's all kinds of new things out there within the space that we're in. So we try to learn as much as we can and then bring that, I ask everybody, bring something forward and then let the group evaluate it and move on it. So that's kind of our test.
How have you implemented culture as a growth agent in the organization? How have you documented that? How have you implemented it? What does that look like for all of you?
I mean, we start from the beginning. One, it's innovation is a guiding principle at ThunderTech, and then we take these guiding principles and things like the seriousness around growth and bake it into our hiring process, right? So, have you been in these types of organizations before, or can you demonstrate you have some natural wiring to allow yourself to adapt to growth? And not everyone has that, and that's okay. But we need to find that out early versus when they're on the team too late.
We being a service-based company and, our biggest expense is labor, culture is important. And so we try to value everyone. We have a smaller management team than labor force, but engaging people, making sure that they feel appreciated, and also kind of teaching them that we're the experts here. We're specialized. And sometimes we'll get like a new team shirt that says specialized, skilled. It's something small, but it makes them feel like they're doing something important, and they are. And I tell people what we do is really important, because if you were going to have a loved one in a hospital, wouldn't you want to make sure that they were getting the best possible care and the cleanest possible equipment? And we're doing things that help people. So within our labor, we try to do that. Within our management team, again, appreciation and looking for new opportunities for growth by, teaching everybody that we are the experts in our field, and we're going to continue to move forward as that.
For me, the biggest thing is people want to see the impact of their work each day. And I think that's what culture is.
Mm-hmm.
When accountability and responsibility or empowerment aren't aligned, that's when you get a problem, right? When somebody has very high responsibility, but you don't empower them to make any decisions, it's a culture killer. Or when somebody has very low responsibility and high empowerment, I mean, that's a problem too, because they can make any decision they want and you don't hold them accountable for it. But we've all been in that job before where you're responsible for an outcome, but you don't feel empowered to make those decisions. I think that's the number one builder of culture is people are naturally born to be proud of the work they do.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one way to measure how well you're doing at this is when you post a job, how many employee referrals do you get?
Yeah.
If you don't want to bring your wife to come work at this company, or your husband, or your cousin, or your friend, or your neighbor, I don't know that you would want to work at this company, because if your culture is that great, you'd be begging your friends, you've got to come work here. It's the greatest company in the world. So for me, the best measuring stick isn't a survey monkey thing we put out to say like, how are we doing? It's actually how many people are trying to get their friends and family members in the door to work for the same company.
That's awesome.
And providing incentives,
Yes.
when they do refer.
100%.
That's important.
So if they leave the session remembering one thing about growth strategy, Laurie, I'll start with you. What do you want that to be?
Don't be afraid to take a risk. Come up with an idea. My background, I was a history major in college. Did I ever think I was going to be an expert on hospital disinfection? No way. I kind of graduated with I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I went into sales, and I did really well in sales, and I worked for a Fortune 500 company, and I learned how to talk to people, how to solve their problems. So in going down the path I went, although it may not have been what I was anticipating at the time, I took a risk. I, bought the company, made it, woman-owned small business, which, I've done really well with. But sometimes you have to think about, okay, robots. All right, we're going to try it. So sometimes, just going ahead, taking a risk and trying something because you've got that feeling like this could work and this could be really big.
I could build on the risk, because I think the first part of growth is you have to have some very, very honest conversations with yourself as the leader of how much risk are you willing to take on? If it's little and you expect big rewards, I mean, tell me who your financial advisor is, because I would love low risk and high rewards too. If you want high growth, you're going to have high risk. Then what you need to do is accept that and commit to it.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to communicate that to your team and say, this is the strategy. This is how we're going. These are the marching orders of how we're going to do this. Now, you have to have very brutal, open conversations about when you start to see that risk bloating higher than what you thought you kind of agreed to. And you need to make sure that the people that you're working with each day are raising their hand and saying, hey, this is creeping a little bit more into the red or into the negative, higher risk territory than we wanted. So I'd say number one, it starts that you have to define the risk that you are willing to deal with. And then you have to commit to that risk and have a measuring stick for, are we under that risk level, over that risk level, and make sure that your team knows we're in growth mode or we're in cut mode. But when you try to sit in both camps, that's, I think, when disaster happens. You need to commit to one and be honest with yourself.
And have no debt if you can.
Yes, that's important
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Not having debt.
Well, I think to base why we're here, the next million tends to be all around us, right? Now that takes a glass half full kind of attitude, but if that attitude is started at the top, it will run downhill. But if you don't have that attitude, I just don't see many places where it trickles up from the middle or the bottom, right? And I will say too, what I see is the limiting factor is that there's a choice made on growth in terms of, the geography or the type of service or whatever it is. There's a limiting factor. And I think the best clients we have are the ones that take a matrix approach. Can we look at geography? Can we look at industry? Can we look at type of client? Can we look at the service mix, right? And split those up. Now it becomes more complicated, but you can also make and find opportunity, I think, where it may have passed you by in the past.
That's great. Well, please join me in thanking this awesome group of individuals